The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
And welcome back to the Afterlife Radio Podcast. I'm Kalila Smith coming to you live from New Orleans, the mystical land of voodoo. I'm going to be exploring today different aspects of spiritual beings. And by the way, Billy, one of the things here in the state, one of the things that's very, very popular is everything being a demon. Everybody's screaming demon, and it all comes from the TV show. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce my wonderful, wonderful co-host who is coming to you live from Cornwall, the UK. And again, folks, that is England to the rest of us Americans who don't know any better. And he is the inventor of television psychics, the great Billy Roberts.
Hi, Kalila. Nice to be back.
Hey, nice to be back. Nice to have you back. And So let's get this kicked off right away, because this is going to be an exciting show. What do you think about this, going on these paranormal investigations, especially cemeteries, and they're always going to scream. They always start saying there's a demon out there. There's a demon. I think there's an overuse of the word demon and inappropriate use of the word demon. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't expect to find my mother or father in a cemetery. They're just the remains of the individual who's buried there or cremated. But I do often get the sense that if a person has been malevolent when they were alive, a person who was the perpetrator of some heinous crimes, when they die, they don't suddenly become angelic or almighty godlike. They still have all the tendencies that they had when they were in the physical world. They don't change. And the only thing is, they don't have access to physical people, but they do have access to your mind. So they often search this world for people with a propensity to the way they were, the things that they enjoyed doing, and they can influence the minds of people just like them. As to going to haunted houses and paranormal groups, you do have to be careful. I'm not a believer in demonic forces, but there are demonic people, the vagabonds of the astral world. And these are people who haven't dealt with their insatiable desires when they were alive. If they're still the same when they pass over, they still retain all these qualities, all these cravings. An alcoholic or a drug addict who hasn't dealt with the problem before they die still has the craving for alcohol or drugs. The only difference is they don't have access to it, but they do have access to the minds of people with the same propensity as them, addicts who are still alive and alcoholics. So it's a very strange world. We live in a very multidimensional universe where there are different spheres, each one rising in a gradually ascending vibratory scale, from those which touch the physical world to those which touch the great astral world. So we do have to be very careful, but we are dealing, as I said on a previous program, we're dealing with an emotional minefield. We have to tread with great caution. Vagabonds of the astral world do exist, and these are people who haven't dealt with their own natures when they were alive. So they do become a problem to mediumistically inclined people. That's my theory.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. Based on some of my experiences, and also the things that I've learned in my spiritual path. And many years ago, when I first started teaching about the paranormal and working on the tours and everything, I read a great deal of books at the time. And this was long before we met, Bailey. But
Yeah.
I read a fascinating book that really kind of changed everything for me, and it was called The Unquiet Dead.
Uh-huh.
And it was written by a psychologist, and she said basically the same thing that you just said. I mean, she had this theory that there were a lot of people who would die that remained attached to addictions, but she felt that they would become spiritually attached to people, and rather than demonic possessions, you had people that and I believe this because I see a lot of this in the French Quarter. People who literally have the dead attached to them. And do you feel that these things, these flaws in these people's character, do you think these are your earthbound spirits? Do you think this prevents these people from fully crossing over to the next realm? Do they stay in that area that would be considered more of an earthbound
I think
connection?
it depends really on the individual. If once they pass over, they might not have liked who they were when they were alive. So they might endeavor to reach out, if you like, to a more spiritualized environment. It's only the people who enjoyed the way they were when they were alive. They might have enjoyed killing people or imbibing all kinds of drugs or whatever. If they enjoyed it and their demise was brought about as a result of that, they might not want to change. So the individual, the disembodied soul, does have to want to change. The light is always present. And there are always these angelic beings who are reaching out for these lost souls, if you like. But they're on the lowest scale. Don't forget, Jesus said, "In my Father's house are there many mansions." So he was referring in his way to the different vibratory tones of the universe, because everything is out there. And I believe that the people who are evil, like Adolf Hitler, for an example, they are in the low zones. They vibrate very slowly. So they have great difficulty ascending to a higher plane, and he would never achieve it. But if there's a need, a want to ascend, to become more spiritual, to get rid of the dross, the heaviness that's holding them back, then I do believe they can be helped. But they do have to want to.
Oh, I totally believe that as well. But I truly believe that there are disembodied spirits that are earthbound. And I think a lot of times when people are on paranormal investigations, if they even get something, because I also believe that a vast majority of hauntings are just residual, but if they do get an actual spirit that's communicating and is aware of their presence, that is what you're tapping into, is that earthbound spirit. And someone who is not spiritually evolved, once they crossed over, they choose to remain. And I don't believe anybody's stuck. I totally don't believe that. And I think it's been proven, through mediums and so forth and talking to spirits. But without a doubt, I feel that there are people who choose not to cross over into that more healing realm that's going to ascend their spirit.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, even
Yeah.
in Buddhism, they refer to Kamaloka. This is the first plane that you touch upon when you pass over. Spiritualists might call it the Summerland or the spirit world. And the Kamaloka is more or less like this world, only more vibrant. And then the aim is for them to attain a certain status, to move on to other planes that are called Diva-chan, the Divachanic planes. Now, the Divachanic means the land of the gods, because the whole aim is to achieve a certain status. So it's pure experience, to come to terms with the fact that the physical body is transitory. It was never real. The Buddhists call it Maya, the great illusion. So we're aiming for something very high, and the highest plane is Diva Chan. And a lot of spiritualists don't understand the concept of the different planes. And as we've discussed previously, a lot of spiritualists don't accept the fact that there are different planes. But there has to be, because we're all different. We all have different temperaments. We're all different spiritually. We all have different needs, different desires. And so we have to be different. And we can't all be confined to the one plane. It just wouldn't make sense to me. Would it you?
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's very fascinating. So when you talk about the different realms, you know, one of the things that I've come with, because people have different paths as they're becoming mediums, and I always encourage people to try different things. Don't just go to one particular mentor. Don't go to one spiritual path. Go and experiment. Go and feel it out. Get information from different paths and different schools of thought, because it just broadens your awareness and it broadens your abilities, as far as I'm concerned, just understanding what's on that other side. And I spent many years in some of the African traditional religions. Some of the things that I have studied more than anything is the Kardakian Spiritism, which is used a lot in Brazilian religions, and also in Santeria, which is Cuban. And we used to sit in the spiritual misas, which is a little bit different than the traditional English type of circles. But, it always contained a lot of prayers for protection, a lot of prayers to keep out other spirits that we don't want in. That was a big thing, was to repel those other spirits and keep them out, and bringing in your spirits to protect you as you're opening up these portals. So I always carry that with me, that, there's a definite awareness of what is out there. And in the Spiritism, when I was in Brazil, it was very interesting, because what they call this realm of when you first cross over, before going through that light, there's kind of a semi-dark place. I don't know if people would necessarily call it hell, but it was a very dark place, and they called it umbral. And umbral in Portuguese actually translates into doorway. Basically, they're saying it's a portal, and the spirits that wind up in umbral can move on, but like you said, they have to choose to, and that these angelic beings go to them and try to get them to come on, and they'll tell them, no, go away, I want to be here. And but it seems to be a very, very lower vibrational realm that's involved there, and I think that people need to be aware of it. I'll never forget, there was a time we were doing a physical seance. We were doing a table tipping session over at the Metaphysical Center, and Sid Patrick, who also wrote the book with me, Seance Experiments. We were doing one of the table tipping seances, and he and I had always argued about that, because he always said, "Oh, no, everything's light and fluffy. Once you leave the body, that's it. You escalate. You go crossing right over." And I said, "I don't think so." So we were doing a table tipping one day, and the table was not lifting. And I told him, I said, "This does not feel right. This is just not." There's a heaviness in the room. There's something going on here. And at some point I was like, okay, we're singing to raise the vibration. And I said, please turn the music on. I said, we need a little help here in raising this vibration. And he got up to go over to turn the music on. And when he did, he stopped abruptly. Now it's pitch black dark in the room because it's a table tipping. And his voice was shaking. And he says, Kalila, he says, we need to close the circle now. We need to close it up. And we need to turn the lights on. And I was like, okay. So I closed the circle. And we got everybody else out of the room. We turned the lights on. And I said, okay, what happened? And he said when he stood up and he tried to walk over to where the player was, to turn on the player, to turn the music on, he said he felt like he bumped into a physical body. And it told him, sit back down. Now, that being said, we later found out that there was a psychic in there who had done a reading for somebody who had just gotten out of prison. And she decided to do a cleanse on the guy and cleansed him in the room and did not cleanse the room afterwards.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, it was a good point made to him that, Yeah, there was something in there, and it definitely had an effect on our ability to connect to those higher spirits. It was something there that was really blocking it. So I totally believe in it. Absolutely. I think that's, and it's important for a lot of people to understand it too, because people come into this and they're told everything's light and fluffy,
Exactly.
and they don't understand that no, it really isn't. And there's a lot of deceptive spirits out there, a lot of things that will present themselves.
And these are
Don't you agree?
yeah, I totally agree. Um, it's a lot of people have far-fetched and fanciful ideas as to what it's all about with the spirit world and disembodied souls. And there are evil people in this life, and there are evil people in the spirit world, and they will always endeavor to come to vehicles of light. Now, vehicles of light are mediums. Even the developing mediums, you transmit a different energy than an ordinary person. And the spirit people are always attracted to that, either to help or to hinder. So you always have to tread with great caution when you're involved in anything paranormal. I've had a few really strange encounters in the past. I mean, you have to feel an energy. There was a house in a place called Southport where I used to live, and it was a Victorian house that the guy couldn't sell. He couldn't sell it because he said it had a poltergeist. Now, I'm very suspicious of poltergeist, people who say they've got a poltergeist, because often it's an excuse why they can't sell it, or they want me to make it an attraction in some way. So I went along to this place. To cut a long story very, very short, after a couple of tries entering the house, it was like World War III had transpired. And he told me at the end that his daughter lived in an apartment at the very top in the attic with a young baby. But when I was in this house, I walked up the broad Victorian staircase, which is beautiful. And there was a stained glass window on the first landing that was dirty, grimy, and the sun filtered through it. And I was just for a moment mesmerized by the patterns the colored glass was throwing on the staircase. And as I stood there, I was overwhelmed with a pungent smell of burning rags and urine, which is often indicative of a poltergeist before it starts to become active. And I was overwhelmed with this feeling, and also I became very nervous. And I'm not usually a nervous person in an environment like that, but I was actually picked up. Now, the owner of the house was at the foot of the stairs. He wouldn't come up. I was actually picked up probably 2 inches, he said, off the floor and thrown violently against the wall. Now, that happened twice.
Wow.
There was an old vase on the window ledge under the stained glass window. That actually shot off the window ledge and landed very gently on the floor. Now, I saw that with my own eyes, but I also felt, when I was picked up, I felt somebody physically picking my body up and pushing me with force against the wall. Now, I went back the next day to the house because it made me feel really ill and sick. And I thought, I got a bit frightened then. I thought, God, because I'd heard that another medium had attended the premises and they were violently ill and wouldn't return. And I was always taught that if you run away from something, it will gather force from whatever you're running away from and follow you wherever you are. I went back and we found out there were 2 things that had occurred over the 50 years in the house's history as being an apartment. One was an elderly man who wasn't evil, but he had no family, and he was confined to bed with cancer, and he'd been ill for a long time in this particular room. Well, all the energies he discharged had created this, not a malevolent force, but this very unsavory force that permeated the house. And it was also in the 60s, when there'd been flats there, apartments, a young guy had hanged himself from the stairwell. Now, they found all this out. I came up with this information, and they found it in the history of the house. But all this energy that had been created through the suicide, through the man dying of cancer and being very miserable, had all congregated into some force that seemed malevolent, became a poltergeist. We know that a poltergeist is supposed to be a mischievous spirit, but more often than not, it's only to do with pockets of energy, disruptive energy that can be quite powerful. And that was it, basically. And the house, he asked me, would he ever sell it? I told him, yeah, with great difficulty, but it would eventually be demolished. And I told him it would be bought by a foreign businessman, which eventually it was. And the house was demolished. The only thing was, I found out, they built a home for the elderly on the same site.
Oh.
So I had this, because you can't...
The irony, yeah, the irony.
You can't destroy energy. You can
Right.
only... It transmutes into different forms. So I had an impression of all these elderly people on Zimmer frames and on wheelchairs being thrown around by some malevolent force. I thought it was quite humorous, but they would experience something.
Yes, it's ironic for sure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Now, don't you feel though is that sometimes what people would call a poltergeist, and this has just been my experience in people calling in and reporting certain activity going on in their house, oftentimes it would turn out to be not necessarily from the dead, but from energy from the living.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, a lot of the telekinetic energy that was coming off of the living. And I found that a lot with people who were either engaged in recreational drug use or people who had certain types of personality disorders or mental illness.
Exactly.
You know, bipolar, for example.
Yeah.
Bipolar people threw off a different type of energy. You know, even adolescents who were going through their hormonal changes.
Exactly.
Would throw off this kind of energy. But there's been often times where, you know, people would call in and they have this poltergeist going on. And then you later find out that someone in the home was addicted to drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there, because, I mean, kids, usually females in puberty, can create this sort of hormonal energy, a very subtle energy that can disrupt the atmosphere. And also, I missed this point. The guy's daughter who lived in the apartment at the very top in the attic of the house, she had a baby. Now, it was a female baby. And the girl who was the mother of the child, she was also quite psychic. And I think she had some disorders, some mental problems. But between her and the baby, I think they contributed to what was going on in the house. Because I noticed their apartment was immaculate. There was nothing going on there. It was just in the rest of the house. It was strewn with broken chairs, old tables, and all kinds of things had gone on. And some years later, I met the girl's mother who came to one of my shows, and she told me everything that had happened to the house. It was knocked down and what had transpired. But she confirmed what I've just said about her daughter, what she'd been through with a broken relationship. She tried suicide, and she had all these thoughts in her head, and the only thing that kept her sane was the baby. But the baby too contributed, I think, to the environment as it was. So you were spot on there, Kalila.
This can happen in the realm of doing mediumship work. This can be something that the energy there can interfere with, you know, if you're doing a home gallery or something, or if you're doing a circle in someone's home that you don't know very well, and you're not clearing the energy in there and making the space. You know, it's important to make the space, you know, create the space, and keep the space clean, because that type of energy can interfere with that. But it's, you know, for people who are doing the ghost hunting thing, I mean, people that go out and are looking into these paranormal investigations, when you run across energy like that, it's so easy to go, demon, there's a demon here. And it's not always, you know, you're dealing with an unseen force, and things are not always what they might unappear to be. Don't you agree?
Totally agree. Yeah, I do. Apart from everything else, though, a lot of money is made on these paranormal by these paranormal groups. In the UK, they make a lot of money. They're charging something like £40-50 a person, and they do make a lot of money. I mean,
Is
I'm
this
not.
for galleries, or is this for
No,
paranormal
this
investigation?
is the paranormal investigations.
Oh
In
gosh, I'm living in the wrong country.
well, exactly. But there's a lot of history in the UK, more
Oh
than there
yeah.
is in.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
I think people do, they go along to these paranormal events, these ghost hunting things, and they do expect something to occur. And the people who run it often create an atmosphere by
Yeah.
fabricating. And I tell you one thing that I was on, I appeared on a well-known TV program for 12 months. And after that, I was invited as a guest to these paranormal nights in different haunted locations. And I went along, I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was in an old part of the UK, quite a distance from where I was then living. And the woman who was it was broken up into different rooms. There was so many people. And she had an EMF meter. It wasn't the one I've used. It was a one with all the colored lights on. I forget what they're called. But she had it on the table, and it suddenly, she said something, and the light started to change. And I thought, this is too much of a coincidence. And she was creating this atmosphere, stirring it up with the people. Anyway, cut a long story even shorter. At the end of it, she laughed. She had a button in her pocket, and she was able to control the lights on the EMF meter.
Oh my
So it
gosh.
was all fabrication. I said, look, I can't be a part of this, because they wanted
No,
me to
no.
do another one, because the people who were there were all excited, and you could see by the atmosphere she'd created it, and it was all fabrication.
Yeah, no, I just have, yeah. Anybody that's, reputable is not going to go along with that. I mean,
Exactly.
I, I've, I've walked away from television shows when I have found out that there's something like that. And I
Yeah.
mean, I actually know someone in the States that actually gave up an entire series because they asked him to fabricate stuff. And it's just,
Yeah.
you don't get, unless you're making money and just conning the public, for money, you have nothing to gain by faking um, phenomena. It's just,
Exactly.
it's wrong on so many levels. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is wrong just on so many levels. You know, I
I
don't know. I wouldn't want to be the person that crosses over and has to explain to spirits
exactly.
my behavior in fabricating something. I just don't think
I think
it's just wrong.
I don't know what it's like in the States now, but here in the UK, the only paranormal shows programs they have are from America. The we used to have a lot of mediums on TV. It's all stopped now. I think it's lost its fascination for a lot of people, as people are becoming more discerning. You get a lot of people who regard themselves as experts in the field. So it's very difficult for program organizers to put on a program that's interesting and appeals to people. But in saying that, the American programs, because Americans tend to be, and I say this because I mean it, more intelligent, the programs coming in from America seem to be more sophisticated. They have more sophisticated gadgetry, all the different things, and they put it over in a better way. It's more appealing to the paranormal enthusiasts in this country. I'm not saying UK people are thick or stupid, but I think that they want more. And I think Americans seem to be able to fit into that category and give them what they're looking for.
Well, I think it's a difference too. I mean, because they do have all the technology
Yeah,
and they make it possible for someone who's not a medium to tap into that other world. And I think, to put it, bluntly, without insulting anyone, I think the American shows just have a few more bells and whistles.
that's one way of putting it.
It's more impressive. It's definitely more impressive.
Yeah.
But the one thing I noticed was that when I was in the UK the last time, I noticed that a lot of people though didn't necessarily think all of our television shows were quite so great, because I noticed they were quoting some names of television shows that I won't mention,
Yeah.
and not necessarily paranormal ones. But I don't think that American television has the reputation that the BBC has, and the integrity that the BBC always had in what shows they chose to put on. And I wish we did have more of that, actually, because it's lost a lot of its authenticity. We have a lot of cool, like I said, bells and whistles, and it's pretty impressive, but it's lost a lot. Even Travel Channel, I worked a lot, many years with the Travel Channel, and I've noticed that the more recent Travel Channel shows have gone more with the, faking some things. But we're going to cut to a commercial now, and we will be right back.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour. A tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN. And it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about. The Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spook house. This is real.
All right, and we are back. So Billy, people will sometimes, and on one of my tours in particular, starting to see more apparitions. And I've actually seen some with the naked eye, and I know they're not being faked. I mean, literally, I see people that are, in a certain place, and I turn, and then they've disappeared. I mean, are we always seeing the spirits of the deceased when we see these so-called apparitions?
I don't think so. And again, this is only my opinion. Just to give you an example, when I was about 7, 8, my dad used to deal in antiques and things, and he had an old Elizabethan cabinet, cocktail cabinet that he was shipping to another country. And I was playing ghosts in the front room of my mother's house with a friend of mine. And I was a very sickly child. And on the wall by the cabinet, because we thought it might have been the cabinet originally, there was a pinpoint of light that grew and grew and grew, became more intense. And it metamorphosed into a small figure like, a statue of Our Lady. But it grew and grew until it became fully formed. And it started to move. It was very animated. But at that point, it was like a projected image on the wall. And then it became 3-dimensional. Well, the kid who was with me, the light went off in the room before that. Sorry, I forgot to mention. The kid I was with, he started to cry and he was frightened. So what he did, he tried to run from the room and couldn't open the door. So he opened the door and I ran in the room next door. And I said to my mother and my aunt who was there, my dad, come quick. I said, Our Lady is next door. Well, you can tell I was very religious, and so was my mum. My dad didn't come, but my aunt and my mother did. And we saw this lady who was attired in like a gown, like Our Lady, like a nun. And my mother thought that she'd come to help me, to make me better. And she thought if I reached out and touched her, then I would be cured. Sounds ridiculous now, but she led me over to...
No, not really. I mean, it could happen, I think.
But she led me over to the apparition, and I reached out to touch it, and it just made a funny sound, like a popping sound, and disappeared. And the light came on of its own accord in the room. Well, there was a film on the floor of like an iridescent pink powder that my mother collected in a bottle. And cut a long story short, nuns came to the house to pray where they believed Our Lady had appeared. And my mum went to show them the powder in the bottle, and it had disappeared. It had gone completely. Now, that apparition preceded a sequence of sad events in the family. Now, I don't know to this day what it was. I always referred to it as the Lady of Light. But in answer to your original question, because I do realize I digress an awful lot.
That's okay.
Sometimes we know when there's an apparition that is a deceased or disembodied soul, because you know that they're aware of you. And they can often, depending on your mediumistic ability, you can often communicate, have a two-way conversation with them. Sometimes it's a telepathic communication, or if you're clairaudient, you can hear their voice. But when there's a sort of a stone tape theory projection of an image with no consciousness, they don't have any awareness of you, because it's just like a photograph in the atmosphere. It's only experience that tells you the difference when you encounter an apparition that is the spirit of a deceased person. And that's all I can say on that subject, really. But it's pure experience that will help you to understand how it all works.
So to this day, you really don't know. I mean, it was some sort of a vision then, right? It
was a vision.
A deity type being? I mean,
I do, because I was brought up, although I'm a Protestant by birth, I was brought up as a Catholic, complicated. I won't bore you with the story, but the family were very religious. My dad was part Jewish, and I was brought up in a very religious environment. And so I believed, and even now I'd like to think that it was an apparition of the Virgin Mary, Our Lady. Yes. But whatever it was, preceded a sequence of very sad events in the family. My dad was nearly killed in a fire. My mother had thyroid cancer or some thyroid problem. And also I had double pneumonia. I was hospitalized, and my grandfather passed away. And it was like one thing after the other. And the nuns said that whoever it was had come to warn us, to comfort us, and to encourage us that whatever happens over the next period of our lives, that everything would be fine. And of course it was. Everything turned out okay in the end, apart from my grandfather, who passed away. He wasn't a very nice man either, but that's another story. Right. So apparitions depends on the place that you're visiting. I mean, you know what the stone tape theory is, don't you?
No, what is that?
Stone tape theory is the quantum physics belief that all energy is encapsulated in the bricks and mortar fabric of a building. So if you listen, if you place your hand, usually in a damp environment, usually stone, sandstone, or grey stone buildings have this energy impregnated of all the people who have lived there, have been there over the 100 years or even longer. And you can actually home into it. You can tap into it. And sometimes this energy, it's cyclic. So it can be released periodically. And it's like watching a video of an old film. You might see a lady in a grey dress. Usually they're always monochrome. They're never in color. And you'll see them walking across the room in front of you. You can speak to them, but there's no awareness because it's just like a photographic image. That's the belief that it's all captured in the bricks and mortar fabric of a building. There's something called tribal luminescence that was an American scientist who suggested that buildings or places that are haunted, if they're built over certain areas, there can be a movement of crystals or some other substances below ground. The friction causes an interruption of the electromagnetic atmosphere, and it can release a whole load of different signals, different energies, and cause all kinds of things to happen. We've had this in Cornwall. Cornwall is Arthurian, it's the land of King Arthur.
Right.
People have seen different apparitions around where he is supposed to have lived. And in Chester, which is a Roman town in England, they've seen Roman soldiers walking through old sewers that were built on the original Roman roads. Workmen have seen them. So we know a lot goes on that are not necessarily to do with spirits. But a spirit can be solid and tangible. You can actually touch a spirit. sometimes and not know there'd been a spirit. If you're walking through a crowded town, city center, you don't know who is real and who is not. All these sea of faces coming towards you, some may not be real. They could be spirits, because spirits can appear real to the person who encounter them.
That's true. That's very true. I've heard that from other psychics and mediums who one in particular with whom I've worked for many years on investigations, Philip. He said when he was young that he didn't know that everybody couldn't do that, and he just assumed that the spirits that he was seeing, he thought they were real people. And he didn't know until he moved here to New Orleans. He came from Oklahoma, and he said when he moved here that he became aware that for a very long time he was talking to people that other people could not see. And he said he was on the streetcar and he was having a conversation with someone, and he noticed everyone staring at him. And someone said something to him, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Well, why wouldn't I be?" He says, "I was just talking to that person." And they said, "There's no one there." And he said that freaked him out more than anything, was because that was the first, as a young adult, him realizing, I'm different. There's something not right here, because I've been talking to these people all along and they're not there. And he found that to be quite frightening in the very beginning.
Well, I was walking down when I was a kid. I was must have been about 9, and I was walking through a little entrance, what we call an entry that comes from one road to another, and a little alleyway. And I was walking. There's a lady behind me pushing a pram, and a gentleman who, at that age, everybody looks old, but he must have been in his 70s, and he had a long mac on and a trilby hat. And all of a sudden, he fell to the ground with a big thud. And I stopped because I didn't know what had happened. And the young lady pushing the pram immediately pushed me out the way and went to the man. But I saw him rise to his feet and walk away. Now, the man was still on the floor. He was still lying there, lifeless. He'd obviously died. But I saw him walk away and disappear into nothingness. Now, I ran in. I just lived around the corner to tell my mother, and she explained what had happened. Because it wasn't an everyday occurrence seeing somebody drop dead. But she explained, and the ambulance came and obviously took him away. And I'd seen his spirit move away from him, or his astral body move away very quickly. It's an experience I've never forgotten. But you do have to, in this field, you have to prepare yourself for every eventuality, because there's nothing can be planned with mediumship. Mediumship can be spontaneous. It can work for the most unexpected reasons. You might be sitting down, having a cup of tea or coffee, thinking of something completely unrelated to the paranormal, and you might have a deceased person coming into your mind constantly. And that's because they are there. They come into your mind because that's the only way they can communicate. Or you might see them out of your peripheral vision, dancing figures, usually at the corner of your eye. And when you turn to look at them, they disappear. So mediumship is very, very unusual. And I find it's a fascinating subject. But I've always concluded that it's not normal seeing dead people.
It's not. It can, and it can definitely throw you for a loop, But I used to physically do some of the tours myself here in New Orleans, and we had started a bus tour at one point where we were going into cemeteries at night. And one of the funniest things that happened was we were in a cemetery, and I know that I had 24 people that night. The bus holds 28 people. I had 24 people, and I let them kind of go and walk about on their own. And I pointed to one road, and I said, please just don't go down this way because you won't hear me when I call out to you. So everyone kind of took off with their cameras for a little free time of photographing. And I happened to notice a lady walking down that way, and she was dressed like a tourist. She had on shorts and she had a handbag, she looked to be, in her 50s, and she had two young people with her, looked like teenagers or young adults. And I figured this is just a family. And they kept walking further away, and I kept calling out to them. And I kept saying, no, don't go down there. Please come back, come back. It's time to leave. I need you to come back. Please, folks, come on back this way. And they just ignored me and kept walking. And then I happened to look back over my shoulder, and I saw 24 people standing behind me, looking at me as if I was completely insane. And I said, oh, there you are. And I said, do you guys see the, and I pointed and I said, and they're gone. Let's get back on the bus. And it was very strange because nobody else saw them but myself.
Stay tuned for more Afterlife Radio.
Step beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of spirits with me, Kalila Smith, as we uncover the mysteries of the afterlife. This is a spiritual journey as we try to discover if life really does continue after the physical death. Are after-death communications real, or do we imagine them? Get my book, Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, and find out. Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, available on Amazon.com by Kalila Smith. And we are back, and Billy's back too. I seem to have lost him momentarily, but that's what happens, folks, when you're talking about spirits and the paranormal. It's interference with electronic equipment is the most common form of interference that you can get. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in investigations and all the batteries are drained, but welcome back, Billy. We're all back here, and we are going to move along here. Now, instead of giving a tip, I tell you what, one of the best tips that we can give new budding mediums is to read as much as you can. And I have books, and Billy's got he's a plethora of information, and he's got many, many books. So, Billy, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and how they can find out about your books and so forth.
Well, my web address, my website is down at the moment, having a new one constructed. But you can always email me at Billy Roberts, all lowercase, Billy Roberts @sky.com. Or you can find me on Facebook. I'm easy to find. But all my books are on Amazon, or you can buy signed copies from me. And I do. I've 31 books published. So I try to explore as many different subjects as possible, particularly for people who are interested in developing their mediumistic skills.
The thing is study under many different people, read as much as you can, go down as many avenues as you can. And I'm easy to find because it's KalilaSmith.com. I'm also on Amazon. Do look us up on Facebook. Start following some of our posts and so forth, because, this is how you learn. This is how you develop.
I think, you hit on it here. Read as much as you possibly can. One of the first books I read was the 14 Lessons in Yogi Philosophy and Oriental Occultism. And it's by a guy called Ramacharaka, Yogi Ramacharaka. And it's a book that could have been, it was written in the 1800s, but it could have been written today with all the terminology. And it's a book about different aspects of development. I find it very useful. Obviously, like any book, you take from it what suits you. And not all techniques will suit you. But I like to... one of my books is called the Nadi Technique, and it's a self-healing book, but it has a lot of information about developing your abilities, such as the chakra system, the aura, how to get the best from your own bioluminescence, which is the aura, and how to enhance it, and how to get the best from your chakra system. So these things are very useful to explore as many different concepts as you can. I've had a developing medium say to me, I never read. And I say, why? And they say, because the spirit will give me all the information I need. You've never read a book? No, I don't need to, because I've got it all there. And that's a bit ignorant, really, to say that.
Yeah, you have to study. You have to read.
Oh, yes, I think so.
Yeah, it's important. And I mean, and get out and travel, go to other places, go take workshops with different people, exactly. And I mean, if you're here in the United States, go to England. Go to England.
Yeah,
I mean, go study, go travel, because this is how you learn. This is how you get exposed to things. And you may walk away with a lot of information. You may walk away with one thing that really stuck with you, but
ex-
it's all an experience, and that's what you want to do,
yeah,
because you're opening yourself up to mediumship, and you're developing yourself, and you have to think about your spirits on the other side. They are developing with you.
exactly.
It's a give and take kind of situation, because you are not only developing yourself, but you're developing your relationship with your spirits on the other side and how you communicate with them. So when you go somewhere, you're literally taking your spirits with you. Don't you agree, Billy?
Yeah, totally agree with everything you're saying. My approach to development is holistic. So people say to me, "Well, I'm clairvoyant. I'd like to develop it further." But as you've just said now, sometimes you go into a workshop or you embark upon a course of development, and the things you think you're going to develop don't develop. You develop other qualities, and that's why I like to be holistic in my approach to mediumistic development, to develop the whole person, because your full potential has to be reached. And it could be that you develop clairaudience, the ability to hear, clairsentience. Clairsentience is often underestimated. People think, well, how can I describe a deceased person when I only sense them? How can I know the sound of their voice, how they died? Because clairsentience covers a broad spectrum of intuitive qualities, and it gives you can glean a lot of information about an encounter with a deceased person just by sensing their presence. The whole thing is so fascinating to me.
It is, and I found that you know, you know, as you get seasoned, as you become more seasoned with things, you will develop your other clairs, so
Yeah,
you don't want to set limitations. That's the one thing. You don't want to set limitations on spirit, because spirit will take you as far as you can go. And if
exactly.
you set limitations, spirit's like, oh, well, they only want to learn this much. Or if you're stuck on, well, I'm clairaudient and that's what I do, I'm clairaudient, but you may develop yourself to a point and you suddenly start seeing and you become clairvoyant, or you become clairvoyant, because I've got all of the clairs and I use all of them. I shift in between them at all times, but I didn't start out being clairvoyant. 20 years ago, I would feel something. I was mostly clairsentient, and I'd feel something, and I would always have another medium with me to translate what I was feeling. And then as time went on, I became clairvoyant. I started seeing things, and it was like I clicked up a level, and then I became clairaudient. And you never want to set limitations ever,
Exactly.
because its spirit is limitless.
But some anthropologists believe that before our prehistoric forebears uh, evolved the mode of speech, we communicated our thoughts and feelings telepathically. And it was a 19th century dramatist and mystic by the name of Maurice Maeterlinck from Belgium. He said, we only evolved speech so we could tell lies. And, and I think that I've never forgotten that. And I think it's an
That's a
interesting way of putting it, because
interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting way of putting it. But yeah, if
you can
we were
lie.
all telepathic,
Yeah.
how
I,
how true would everything be? But we've just about run out of time here. Billy, thanks again.
okay.
As always, it's a pleasure. And Billy will be on the next show. He's going to always be here. And we will see you guys next week. Well, we won't see you, but you'll hear us. And we will talk about some more fascinating aspects of the afterlife. Have a wonderful day, folks.
Yeah, nice. Nice to speak to you all.